Welcome to the show Retire Right by Outlook Money. This episode is in association with HDFC Pension Management Company Limited along with Outlook Money. I am Nidhi Sinha, editor Outlook Money, and today's topic of discussion is what you can do to build a robust retirement corpus. We have with us today Mr. Sriram Iyer, Chief Executive Officer of HDFC Pension Management Company, who will shed some light on this topic. In the last two episodes of Retire Right, we discussed the need for retirement planning, where Mr. Iyer gave us some eye opening data and facts and discussed the barriers on this road to retirement that we need to collectively overcome. Now that we know all of that and realize how important it is to plan one's retirement, let's get into the next step and discuss how to work towards building a retirement corpus that can sustain us through our golden years. Welcome to the show, Mr. Iyer.
Thank you very much, Nidhi.
Very happy to host you again, Mr. Iyer. And coming to the question straight. So when it comes to the question of how to build a robust retirement corpus, which is our topic today, the obvious answer that comes to mind, of course, is, start saving for retirement. But can random saving be the answer, or can structured saving really change the outcome?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think not only is it important for you to start saving, but the earlier you start, the better off you will be. And I think all of us understand the power of compounding. The power of compounding, especially towards the rare end of the journey, can have a magical impact. And that can happen if you start early. Now, I understand, I'm cognizant of the fact that at the age of 25, when one is just about started working, there are a lot of other priorities that come into play, right? I mean, people want to consume things. They've been dreaming of buying that next fancy phone, next fancy car, and whatnot. And I think it's pretty natural. I don't think one should critique that at all. I mean, individuals have a right to, once they start earning, they should also consume, right? And consumption is what leads to the growth of the economy. Having said that, I think the important point that I'm trying to make is that you need to take the first step. With your first salary, if you can take your first step towards creating a retirement kitty, you will bless yourselves, you will thank yourselves for your younger self later in life, right? And, this is something that those of us who grew up in the 90s and probably at a time when, all of the financial products that you have today were not so easily accessible, we realize today that had we started our journey maybe 7, 8, 10 years back, we would have been in a dramatically different situation. Let me give you an example, right? And we use this example when we explain the impact of time or impact of starting late. And what resonates with people we've seen is that, every day's delay is going to cost you a certain amount of money is what resonates very well, right? I mean, if I tell you that if you start 10 years early, you will make 2x of what you would otherwise make, you may say, okay, that's fine. But if I tell you that for every day of delay in starting to save for your retirement, you're going to lose 1,586 rupees. I mean, this is just a number that I made up just now, right? But if I were to tell you that, the impact of that statement is far more significant because there is a lot more loss aversion that all of us suffer from, rather than, everybody understands this book, that behavioral economics book, which talked about the issue with loss aversion, right? And how we are all more wired to sort of be more scared of losses. Anyway, so using that, if you were to, so coming back to the point, right? So one is start saving, but start saving early. The earlier you start, the better off you will be. So right from the first salary check, if you can start putting aside even a very small amount of money, it doesn't matter. It could be $1,000, right? It doesn't matter. The quantum of money is not so material, right? What matters is that you need to make a start, because what ends up happening is that if you see the way that money behaves over a period of time, you will be motivated to commit more and more. And therefore, it is important for you to start early, right? Start early. Point number 2, I think, there is this whole myth around risk appetite. I mean, sorry for calling it a myth, but the reality is that at the age of 25, you have a good runway of 30 to 35 years before you will, let's say, technically retire, in the traditional parlance. Of course, these definitions are changing now. People want to retire early. People want to stop working at the age of 40 and 45. Again, that's an individual personal decision, right? But The fact is that you have anywhere between 20 and 30 years ahead of you. And in my estimation, as time progresses, retirement ages in India will also start going beyond 60, right? Globally, we know that there are a number of countries where there is no concept of retirement age, right? You can't ask a person to retire because there is no concept of a retirement age, right? Like in the US, there are entities which actively, there's no concept of retirement, right? So given that, I think if you have 20, 25, 30 years of time ahead of you, I think there can't be a better asset class than equity for you to start committing money. And therefore, that's the second point, right? Start early, start allocating a large component of this savings, of this, whatever you're putting aside towards equity as an asset class. And the reason why I'm stressing this point on equity is because I also keep getting calls from friends, from clients saying, hey, listen, the election results are, out of the next 1 week, 10 days or whatever it is. What should I do? And the next question that I have is that two things, right? One is this the only money that you have, right? You have a very large corpus which is sitting in your EPF, Employee Provident Fund, which is all debt, right? Secondly, even if the market were to, let's say, correct, what are you going to do with it, right? What does it mean to you, right? Is your world going to come to an end? Are you saying that you're going to take the money out? No, you don't need this money, right? You have a paycheck, you have a monthly income. So I think the risk of equity is, especially at younger ages, I think is sort of overblown, right? And therefore, start early, allocate a meaningfully large portion of your corpus towards equity, because whether we like it or not, that is the only asset class that has the power to beat inflation over long periods of time. And that's borne out by data for the last 25, 30, 35 years. Look at all kinds of data, different rolling return cuts. You will see that a basket of diversified stocks is best placed to help you beat inflation, right? And therefore, you need to keep that in mind. So that's the third point. The fourth point is that, many a times what ends up happening is that, and this is again about related to asset class, right? I mean, there is this whole belief that you should save for retirement in asset classes which are safe, right? I mean, that there can't be a bigger myth in my opinion, because the longer you have as time horizon, we need to understand that fixed income returns will keep coming down, right? I mean, if you look at fixed income returns 10, 15 years back and the fixed income returns that one is able to get today, there is a significant difference. As the economy develops, fixed income rates and interest rates are going to keep coming down, and therefore your portfolio, if it is largely skewed towards fixed income kind of vehicles, is going to not be able to bear the brunt of inflation as time progresses, right? And inflation is not going to slow down. That's not, while it may come down structurally, but there will be consumption categories where the inflation will not necessarily ebb, right? So therefore, making sure that all of these, considerations are kept in mind while starting to save for retirement is very, very key.
Right. So you were talking about the loss aversion people go through. You also talked about the myth of the risk appetite that people have. These things are, of course, also related to awareness and, knowing how to structure your savings. And in this scenario, and I believe a lot of Indians are in that situation where they do not understand what is right for them, perhaps. Is it important to seek out financial advice?
Absolutely. Now, if you look at the way the markets have developed over the last 20, 25 years, financial products have become a lot more popular. The campaigns that have been done by industry participants, be it the mutual fund industry, or be it the insurance industry, or be it the NPS industry, to which I belong, there is a lot more awareness that individuals have. Having said that, creating a robust portfolio is not about having a diverse basket of products. It is, of course, about having a diverse basket of products, but how do you make sure that these diverse basket of products that are there, you understand the interplay between these products. You understand the interplay of risk between these products. You understand the interplay of returns between these products. Some of these products could be correlated very closely. Some of these products may not be correlated, right? Now, all of these are nuanced decisions that require some degree of experience, right? Now, most of us, would go to a doctor if we fall ill, But when it comes to our financial portfolio, we think a do-it-yourself approach is the best approach. And I don't have any complaints against that. I'm not saying that you should always necessarily maybe seek external advice. But I think in most cases, in most people's cases, I would strongly recommend that you have a conversation with a financial advisor. There are, retirement advisors that are registered with PFRDA that are available to you for conversations. There are independent financial advisors. There are, as they are called, registered investment advisors, if I remember the term correctly, which are registered with SEBI.
Yeah.
They are only allowed to charge a fee to the client and not take any commission from the products that they recommend to you. These are all, and I have had the good fortune of interacting with some of these people in this community. They bring a tremendous amount of value to the table. Not just the registered investment advisors, retirement advisors. These people do it for a living. They are extremely, they have sort of learned the tricks and learned the ropes by experience of having dealt with numerous clients at different life stages. Your bank RMs are also, I think, of late, all the financial services institutions, wealth management companies, and the more institutional players have also built capabilities, made sure that their RMs, private bankers, as some of them are referred to, are capable of delivering advice. So I think, to make sure that you're not just putting a random basket of products together and hoping that it works for you, I think it makes eminent sense to seek professional advice. Not just seek professional advice at the time of initiation of the relationship, because it's a conversation. You need to, anybody who's gone to a homeopath will say that the first half an hour or 1 hour, they would want to understand your lifestyle. They would want to understand your mood and so on and so forth. Financial advice is very similar. As Morgan Housel, this great, superb writer, he always, and I keep quoting the example, personal finance is more personal than finance, right? And therefore, it is important for you to understand which kind of an advisor will work for you. There are a whole host of advisors available today. Just at the, you get onto the web and you'll be able to find them. Have conversations with them and work with somebody who will not just help you initiate the journey, but will also continue to engage with you through the journey, right? It's not just important for you to put a plan together, but continue to evaluate the plan, continue to make sure that you're on the right track. Make sure that you've, reviewed the portfolio at least once in 6 months, once in a year is also fine, so that you are sure that you're on the right track. So I think, and therefore, professional advice from competent advisors is an absolute necessity, in my opinion.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Iyer. People must seek out competent advisors in this endeavor to build a retirement corpus, like you said. But also, investing is just one part of it. The other thing is really about building in and putting in place certain safeguards, because it's also safety that you are seeking in retirement. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think this whole business of building a retirement savings is very closely interlinked with, so you have to live your normal life for you to be able to retire into the sunset, right? So you need to make sure that you're prepared for today before you prepare for tomorrow and day after tomorrow, right? And therefore, preparing for today involves a whole host of other things, right? And there is this component of insurance also that is linked to this, right? And this is another big area that there is, of course, significant improvement that's happened in the last few years in India. But even today, in my opinion, and there is also some empirical evidence that is available, Indians, by and large, are severely underinsured. And I think the government, the regulators have also done a lot of work in making sure that, and the industry, of course, is doing a lot of work to make sure that this very important issue is focused upon by individuals. Having said that, so I'm referring to the concept of term insurance. Most people seem to think that the cover that I have from my company is good enough, and that 50 lakhs, 1 crore is good enough. More often than not, they underestimate the requirement that the family may have when the primary earning member of the family ceases to exist. And therefore, that's by far the biggest gap that I see. That's number one. Number two is to make sure that there is adequate medical cover as well. And this is the other thing that I've seen missing in many portfolios. In my experience, in my conversations with individuals, I see that there is this dependence on the corporate cover in most individuals who are salaried. And even for self-employed, there is a very small, medical policy that they would have bought just for the sake of the tax advantage that one gets. And that's about it, right? There are some fantastic tools like Top Up and Super Top Up that's available, which are exceptionally cheap. There are copay options that are now available, which make the entire medical cover exceptionally cheap, right? So I think that's the second thing that one must keep in mind. So making sure that one's absence does not leave one's family and dependents in the lurch is the biggest responsibility that one can have, right? And there are ways to calculate how much should be your cover, right? So therefore, and it is incredibly cheap. India is one of the cheapest markets when it comes to buying term insurance, right? So term insurance, medical cover for oneself and one's family is using the innovative tools like Top Up, Super Top Up, Copay that is all available in various combinations. And of course, making sure that you have an emergency kitty, right? This is really the foundation of your financial plan. Having these in place is exceptionally important. Now, an emergency fund could be anywhere between 6 and 12 months. It's a matter of what gives you comfort, what gives you, what gets you sleep at night. I mean, it could be 6 for some, it could be 12 for some other, but it doesn't matter, right? And the other thing that I see is many people try and optimize returns on their short-term portfolio, which I think is a big no-no, right? If the money is required in the next 2 years, next 3 years, don't try and maximize returns there. I mean, you're not going to make millions of dollars by having a 1% higher rate of return on your short-term or medium-term investments, because the amount of risk that you sign on to for every incremental percentage of return or every incremental 10 bips of return is significantly higher. And therefore, in the short term, when you know that you need this money in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, it is important for you to make sure that capital preservation is key. Even if you need to, don't try and optimize. Don't try just because somebody is giving you a 0.3% more or 0.5% more. You don't necessarily need to succumb to that, right? So these are all very basic things that I'm talking about. But I think the reason why I'm talking about this is because I see these conversations and I hear these conversations, right? And when I hear these conversations, I try to shine the light on what I think is the right approach. And, so term, medical, emergency, making sure that your short-term requirements are taken care of through relatively safe vehicles, right? Nothing is 100% safe, but, bank deposits are very, very safe, right? And of course, there is a DICGC cover up to 5 lakhs as well per account, right? So there are products such as those which are exceptionally safe, and for short-term requirements and milestones that are coming up in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, use those kind of vehicles. Do not try to optimize or maximize your return. Optimize is not the right word. Maximize your returns, right? People are trying to maximize short-term returns as well, which I think is a bit of a problem.
Right. And I believe we saw some examples during the COVID period when people really suffered because of a lack of emergency fund, because, so many lost their lives, they had health emergencies, people lost their jobs, and people perhaps became a bit conscious after that experience. But now again, people are perhaps getting into a comfort zone and forgetting those lessons that they learned during the COVID period. But my next question is also about younger investors. I mean, experts say that one should start saving early and seek advice, of course. But then again, there's a long road ahead of them. And still the conscious one, they seek advice, but it's only about taking one-time advice in a lot of cases. Do you think that makes sense, since, the younger ones really have a long horizon ahead of them?
See, there are multiple things that one should keep in mind. Of course, the answer to that is a straight no, right? I mean, it's not a one-time affair. It is not about just taking advice one time and then hoping that for the rest of your life you can continue to follow the same piece of advice and it will work for you. Because things change, right? When I say things change, multiple things change, right? Your internal situation could change. You go through various stages, and one goes through various stages in one's life. One, when you just out of college, you may decide to get married over a period of time. You might have children. All of these things will mean that you need to keep readjusting your goals will change, right? Goals on as one project progresses through 30s and 35 and maybe 40, one needs to start thinking about not just retirement that we spoke about earlier, but also about making sure that there are substantial amounts of money that are available for various milestones that you may have, right? Like education being one of the big things, right? And more often than not, it is understood that education in India and globally is one of the inflation on this item is probably amongst the highest. It's upwards of 10-12%, right?
That's true.
So it actually can go up by 3 to 4x over a period of 10 years, right? But it is important for you to keep in mind that each of these situations which are intrinsic to you, your own life situation could change, right? And therefore, it is important for you to keep fine-tuning, adjusting based on your life situation. That's number one. Number two, external conditions may change, right? And I'm not a big votary of changing your portfolio allocation from at very short intervals. Not at all. I don't think you should. Once you have a broad asset allocation plan in place, I don't think you should tinker around with it too much. But you might have short-term goals. You might have short-term, short to medium-term goals which are coming up in 3 years and 5 years, and therefore you may need to make changes to your portfolio so that you're provided for those. It's related to the point that I made earlier as well in terms of why you should not try and maximize returns as far as your short-term portfolio is concerned. Also, there are external laws that will change, right? So, for example, we had zero capital gains till I think 3 years back, if I remember correctly, or maybe 4 years back. Long-term capital gains were zero, right? Long-term capital gains came into effect after that, right? There were changes that were made to, policies that are insurance policies, right? I mean, the traditional savings policies that were earlier tax-free. There was a 10x of premium that was paid at the time of 10x of cover paid at the time of making the premium payment. Your proceeds would be tax-free. That changed, last year. That created a significant amount of upheaval, and there was a huge rush for buying those products in, March of 2023, if I recollect correctly, right? Similarly, the debt mutual fund taxation change, right? So these are all changes in external situation, changes in the regulatory environment, which might force you or which must make you relook at your allocations and portfolio to make sure that you're taking advantage or you are, fine-tuning your portfolio. All of these things can be done by a professional advisor who she or he is really tracking these things very closely. And if it is a competent advisor, this advisor will come back to you with, appropriate changes to be made at the appropriate time. So I think it's not a one-time fill it, shut it, forget it approach. It has to be an ongoing process of consulting and fine-tuning as time progresses.
I'm sure our younger listeners have a lot of takeaways from that. So coming to the end of this discussion, Mr. Iyer, what would be the 5 big things, the top things that you recommend in terms of building a retirement corpus to our viewers today?
So I think we spoke about the fact that, you should work with a professional advisor to create a comprehensive financial plan. Now, there are various ways to approach this, and there is a complex way of approaching this. There is a way where, you could spend hours together poring over your expense line items and, going back to the financial advisor and sharing all of these line items with them. I think it is important for you to have a financial plan in place which works for you, right? It may not. So some people may be more comfortable looking at every line item on their expense and making sure that they have captured it and shared it to the financial advisor. But I think you should work on what works for you. And I think even a high-level plan, right, is good enough, right? You don't need to necessarily have the plan chalked out to the last detail. Having a high-level financial plan, which can be as simple as saying, what is the money that I need for the next 3 to 5 years? Can I put it into something which is relatively safe? What is the amount of money that I don't need for the next 5 to 7 years? And therefore, how can I take a higher degree of risk on that in terms of volatility risk on that? And therefore, what are the kind of vehicles that I should allocate that to? That in itself is a very, very high-level financial plan, which is good enough to start, right? Many a times what ends up happening is that in our anxiety to have a financial plan in place, we end up wasting a lot of time, right? I think start the journey by saying, simple thing like saying, what is the money that I need in the next 3 to 5 years? Is there any milestone that's coming up? Do I have enough emergency corpus that what's the kind of emergency corpus that we spoke about earlier I'm comfortable with, right? You do that basic thing, that in itself is the start of a financial plan. Number two, get professional advice, because we spoke about this earlier, right? A professional is somebody who is tracking not just the markets. By the way, you don't need to track the market every single day, right? It's not as if your goals are suddenly changing every single day. The market will be volatile, right? The market will go up and down by 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%. But that is not necessarily going to upset your long-term financial future if you have the right kind of asset allocation. So seek financial professional advice, those that are tracking developments in the market, developments in the broader economy, tracking the implications of changes in tax regulations, changes in the kind of newer products that get introduced. I'm not a very big fan of novelty in financial products, but there could be some interesting products that maybe InvITs and REITs, for example, have been though they are yet to gain scale in India. But I think those are interesting products that will, become more and more prominent as time progresses. So when you work with a financial advisor, they will tell you what not to do. And I'm a big fan of actually knowing what not to do more than what to do, right? So the financial advisor will tell you what not to do and what to do, and make sure that you are on the right path. The third thing is, we spoke about this earlier, it is important for you to revisit your portfolio or your overall financial plan from time to time. I don't mean to say that, every month you open your financial plan and see whether you're on track. This is a 10, 15, 20, 30-year plan that you put in place, right? Review it at the desired frequency. In my opinion, once in 6 months is more than enough, right? But definitely review, because situations change, right? And when situations change, you need to make appropriate changes in your portfolio. You could go through a change of job, right? You might choose to become an entrepreneur, right? And that could be a call that you may take, that 2 years from now I want to start something on my own. Your portfolio will need to necessarily undergo a change to make sure that you're able to plan for that kind of a situation, right? We spoke about creation of an emergency fund. It's important for you to make sure that the emergency fund, the insurances that we spoke about, are all taken care of. And finally, many a times, it's very commonsensical, right? I don't think this whole financial services industry is as complicated as it is made out to be, right? Things are fairly straightforward. Keep it simple and stupid, right? I mean, if you look at the basics of this business, they don't change every day. They don't change every few years as well, right? So get into the habit of understanding, asking questions to your financial advisor, right? Do not just if you don't understand what you're getting into, ask questions, right? Till the time that you have a reasonable understanding, don't get into it, right? If you see a piece of food on the table, if you don't understand it, you don't eat it, right? If you can't recognize what you're eating, you don't eat it. Why should it be any different from financial products, right? So try and develop an understanding. I think there are enough and more very compelling literature that is available today on the on the net. I spoke about Morgan Housel. I think he's one of my favorite authors. I'm sure he's the favorite author for many people in the financial services, personal finance business. There are many such blogs that are available today, podcasts that are available. Stay informed. I think just by listening and reading to some of these people, and they make things very, very simple, right? Simplifying personal finance and personal finance concepts is in itself a very, very big industry now. And I think, one must take advantage of the fact that, things have changed, and things have changed for the better so dramatically over the last few years on account of availability of all such material, right? So we should do all of those things. So I think I've covered maybe 5 or 6. You asked for 5, but maybe I've covered more than 5.
Yeah, that was pretty comprehensive. And my viewers can definitely take away with them this advice, that know what to do and what not to do as well. Like Mr. Iyer said, be curious, ask questions, and you'll be sorted. Thank you so much, Mr. Iyer, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Insurance is the subject matter of the solicitation.